So we have it going. So great. Thanks for being here tonight. First of all, I'm going to reverse the order that we're doing things. I've got a question that's been asked and some comments that have come back, and I'll address those comments straight away. And then I'll ask you guys if you've got anything to have answered, and I'll answer the stuff that's come through. So have we got any other mentors online? Peter, do you know?
Not that I know of. We've got...
You can see on the side. Okay, great. First of all, somebody shared the comment from one of the earlier episodes of ArborMentor about whether Vicky should look at getting her fire component, and their comment was probably just stick with arboriculture. My view of it's slightly different, and that is go for it. Any extra thing that you can get will help you understand, if nothing else. As I said, in New South Wales, the fire code is treated as prescriptive, even though the language is not prescriptive language. And yes, I understand why you need an asset protection zone to stop a metal roof and metal framed house from burning, but I don't. And yes, I understand about debris falling on the roof, and if you have branches overhanging, you get debris falling on the roof. I've got no trees within 50 metres of my office building here, and I see what comes out of the gutter system into the pre-filters before it goes into the tank, and I can assure you that leaves blow laterally. Twigs and branches for somehow or other still end up on the roof, and I suspect that's by birds. So if you are in a asset protection zone area, you need to be cleaning your gutters regardless of whether you've got trees or no trees, and you need to be doing it on a regular basis. And I think we've all seen pictures of the houses in bushfire zones where no trees are around and the house is burnt to the ground, and houses with trees around where they haven't been. Of course, the reverse is usually the case, that having trees around can create more problems. There's also a misunderstanding of how trees burn. Not all trees are highly flammable. Some trees are very low flammability. There's a whole pile of assumptions that just aren't supported by research. So I think that's important to realise that. Certainly, eucalypts have oil in them, and as a result, eucalyptus are far more flammable. Pines have resin in them. Resin is combustible. It's in fact easier to burn a pine when it's green than when it's drying out, because the resin and the chemicals like terpenes are combustible. So I'll encourage you to do any study that you think, but as an arborist, I'd encourage you to do most of your study in arboriculture. And I say that, and I'm happy to talk about it later on, because I continually read things in reports that don't just worry me, they scare me. And they scare me because we shouldn't be where we are on those issues. And to give you an example, I read a report and responded to it today. The report said that there was a fruiting body, fungal fruiting body on a tree, and as a result, they recommended a picus test, and that would have been useful, because most of the guys that do picus have some idea of what fruiting body they're looking at. But what was really scary is that the arborist did not identify the genus and didn't have a photograph of the fungus. So there was no capacity for anyone else looking at that report to get any information. And that's really unfortunate and unnecessary. So hopefully that's something that you can keep in mind. Peter, we did have a question come through, and that this is the only one I really got addressed that issue of things. You said there was a second one that came through.
Yeah, which I sent to the ArborMentor team, and you should be included in that.
Hopefully. I just, I'll open the emails up. Okay.
Did you
The
find
last one I got is about tree growth regulators, which we dealt with. That was 2 weeks ago. And then I got one about fires.
Yeah, no, this is fairly recent, and I'm not sure what the issue is. Hang on, I'm just having a look for it.
That's okay. So let me, whilst you're looking, Peter, and just yell out when you've got it, and you can send it across to my email address. I'll open it straight away. It's open. Looking at the comment that I just made about things that scare me, I guess I have reviewed this year maybe 40 risk assessments. Not because anyone's in trouble or anything else, but because I've been asked to assume that the last risk assessment is suitable starting point. And every now and again, I've come across a brilliant one, and a cheer out to Hugh Millington, if Hugh's ever listening. Great risk report from his. A couple of really good ones from Delaney Smith. But there's some real inconsistencies and problems in risk assessment that are just scary. First of all, there's a tendency for arborists to want to deviate from the system, and I don't have an issue with that, provided you also follow the system. So you should follow whatever risk assessment system you're using to the T. And if you want to vary something, then the place to vary it is after you've done that full assessment. So if you come out and you find that the risk is moderate, or the risk is tolerable, or the risk is 1 in 50,000, and you think there's a reason why that's needs to be adjusted or modified, do that separately to the assessment. So do the assessment objectively, exactly as you would, and then go back from there. And I mentioned a benchmark last time around, the time before this, 1 in 1,000. I mean, realistically, we shouldn't be seeing huge numbers of trees that give us concern. And that raises the next question. Are they really of concern? When someone comes back and says, look, it's a moderate risk tree and you need to remove the dead branches in 2 weeks, does that line up with a moderate risk tree that, or if it's a low risk tree, and I saw a low risk tree, and I even saw a category very low, and whilst I agree that that category probably should be there, there was no explanation of how very low was formed. It was just a category that somebody had figured out. So from my side, from a BTRA, or the Basic Tree Risk Assessment, the ISA track system, that should be a low tree. And what they probably need to do is say something like, whilst these trees are all in the low category, it's obvious that this group of trees is lower than the low. And that doesn't make sense, but that's realistically what the author is saying. And I think I get that, but they haven't said it. And that becomes the problem. You need to provide the logic or the explanation as to why you're deviating from whatever you're using. If you're using a TR equation, same thing, why are you deviating from? Why do you not follow what's done? If you're using the tree protection zone, why are you going from 12 times trunk diameter to 6 times trunk diameter? What's your rationale? Because that's what we want to know as a reader, what the rationale is for that variance. Peter, have you found it?
I'm getting there.
Okay. I know how that goes. So in terms of timeframes for risk, if a risk is, let's say, a moderate risk, and we don't, that's not well benchmarked. It's one of the problems with the BTRA system. Where moderate is somewhere between higher than driving and lower than chairs. So it covers a huge zone. And so that doesn't allow us to really narrow things down. What qualitative assessments do is compare trees with trees. And when you compare trees with trees, you need to have some starting point. So again, if we keep in mind that the mortality rate from trees per tree is about 1 death in every 10 million trees in and adjacent to areas of high urban use. So that's a small number. I can't imagine a number of 10 million. I can imagine one. But if I said, look, there's a big pile of coins, how many coins do you think? How many of you think would be good at guessing 1 million or 5 million? 100, looking at 100 gold coins on the ground, I could guesstimate that, plus or minus probably 20%. But once you get to 1,000, it starts to become harder. 10,000 becomes, because we're not used to seeing things like that. We're not used to seeing so many small ones combined together. So that's one of the problems with those qualitative systems. We don't benchmark it well. If we think that the average tree is in that 1 in 10 million, then for a tree to be a concern, it needs to be probably 100 or 1,000 times worse than the average tree. Now, Matthew, how many trees have got dead branches in? More than 1 in 1,000?
You're just on mute. You're on mute. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
More than 1 in 100?
Yeah.
More than 1 in 10?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this thing about, it's dead branches and it's got to be cut off within 2 weeks, a week, 7 days, next 30 days is probably inferring a level of danger that just doesn't exist. And so we've got to be careful of how we deal with that. And I have struggled as an arborist, and I know a lot of us have, in how to communicate timeframes for doing things. And the way I figured it out was looking at the Work Health and Safety Act. The Work Health and Safety Act outside of Victoria, and Victoria decided not to adopt model provisions. At least last time I heard they hadn't adopted model provisions. The Work Health and Safety Act says you really need to deal with any risk that's unacceptable or tolerable and not as low as reasonably practicable. Now, that language is still used in Victoria as far as I understand, but I'm not sure that the model legislation was adopted. And that is benchmark, because that's looking at it against what they call the tolerability of risk framework. And tolerability of risk framework says something that imposes a risk on a person that's greater than, a completely independent person that's greater than 1 in 10,000 really is unacceptable. And a person shouldn't really pose a risk on themselves of greater than 1 in 1,000. At the other end, we get, if the risk is less than 1 in 1,000,000, most people wouldn't spend their money addressing that. The risk is too small. And so if we look at those frameworks, we already have a framework that says, well, hang on a second here. We have to do things that are unacceptable. In the tolerable range, we may have to, or we may not have to, depending on if the risk is as low as reasonably practicable. And that's what our legislation says in most states. As I said, apart from Victoria, I'm not sure that you're there yet. But in New South Wales, South Australia, Western Australia, all adopted a model that talks about a range of risk. You can't just go and try and manage every risk. Society can't afford it. And in fact, it's discussed in a really long paper in determining what the VOSL, or value of statistical life, should be in Australia for the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet. And in that paper, the author says, look, realistically, we probably should value human life at $17 million, but society can't afford that. And that's the decisions that are made. I know it sounds crazy, but just so frequently, are we going to have traffic lights? What's the road speed going to be? What level of alcohol can we have in our system? All of those are questions that are looked at statistically. Do we require people to have vaccines of things? What's acceptable problem or issue associated with the medication? Are we going to approve it? Do the the benefits outweigh the disadvantages. And so, as low as reasonably practicable, the courts have used that concept in various measures. And the one that I think of that does it well is Wyong v. Shirt, where Justice McHugh, later Chief Justice, Justice McHugh, says, you need to weigh up how severe the thing's going to be, not just is it foreseeable, but how severe the incident's going to be, how likely it's going to be, the resources available to deal with it. So if you're James Packer and, you've got a trip hazard out the front of your house, you're going to have a hard job saying, well, it's going to cost me $500 to fix it. It wasn't reasonably practicable, versus a little old lady who's got the same thing, who's struggling to meet her payments and is behind on her rates to the council. So there are going to be different measures there. But overall, our remedial costs shouldn't be disproportionate. So now, if you look at value of statistical life and you look at the risk, you start making informed decisions. And in Australia, our Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet, the value at the moment is about $5.5 million roughly for a human life. Spending $20 million to prevent that human life from dying is disproportionate, grossly disproportionate. Even more than what the 17 million that we might want to think about. So you get to the stage where you've got to weigh those bits and pieces up and say, well, look, we can't do absolutely everything to prevent incidences. And that's why when you get to a few years older than Peter and I, they start taking away that poo testing kit from you. You've got to go buy it after you get to 75, because they say, well, look, the benefits of that are outweighed. It's why somebody gets killed in a intersection in the Northern Rivers area, and you don't see traffic lights or a roundabout going, because they say, oh, look, yes, there's a risk. We accept there's a risk. It's a real and appreciable risk, but we can't afford to go and put the $1.2 million worth of traffic lights in to save one life every 20 years. It's not reasonable. It's not proportionate. And so the same thing goes with risk. I only see two sorts of tree risk work that needs to be done. Figure out within your budget and your time frame when you're going to get it done. It needs to be done. And if I say it needs to be done, then you know something. If I say, Lisa, and your Airstream behind you is looking great, but if I say, look, there's a problem with the bushes and the axles on that thing, you really need to get it addressed, does that mean you can keep on running it forever?
No, something else will go wrong with it.
Yeah, there's an inferred, you are taking a risk from here on in. So I've really dropped risk down to work that needs to be done, okay, and work that is discretionary. And I put a little group in between that are risks that we call secondary, or issues that we call secondary issues. And secondary issues are things that are currently okay, but may within an inspection cycle or two start to increase to a level where they become something that's essential. And so we just call all stuff that's needed to be done to get rid of high risk trees, or trees that are extreme risk or unacceptable risk, and trees that need to be made ALARP. We just call that essential work. It's nice and clear and simple. It is essential to do. The problem with suggesting that you've got to do it within a week, first of all, says that risk is 50 times higher, because you've only got 1 week. 1 week would be too much. Well, a risk that's 1 in 10,000 for a year is 1 in 500,000 in 1 week. And so it's probably not acceptable to push those time limits as much as that. So just be careful about how you communicate the other half of the risk, which is how quickly does the work be done. Let to some extent the person know. Now, there is a case, Woods v. Mercedes, where the arborist Turner didn't say to the school, look, you could isolate the area out. So there are options that you can do when there is a risk that doesn't necessarily mean doing work straight away. One of those is isolate the area. So if you really think that something is at a level that needs, really urgent attention, the tree's splitting, and you think it's going to fall on top of somebody, then you don't necessarily have to remove the tree. Simply isolating the tree may be sufficient enough to deal with the problem. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yep. Speaking of communication, Mark, please check your emails.
I will do, Peter. Thanks for letting me do that. You can see I've got them there. You won't be in the vlogs, you'll be in the inbox. And here we are. Wow. Questions around reading and interpreting plans. Yes, I do remember us discussing this, Peter.
Yeah, this is from Lisa.
Yeah, look, and the first thing that we get about plans now, and I'll open one up, is that they're almost all now in digital form. And boy, I misprint. I used to bitch and complain about it, but you cannot get an A0 screen with any ease, which means you're looking at bits of screens and moving things around all the time, which is really difficult. And there is no convention as to what's going to be on these things, but there's some things that we get told, which is really great. And if we look at a plan like this, we know it's on Keats Street. That's fine. We've got an elevated weatherboard cottage with a metal roof. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 trees. We've got a metal shed down the back. We've got 3 palms. We've got some unusual contours. Looks like these are almost berms of some description, things that come up and down, or a little mound. We've got a whole pile of numbers, and I'll zoom in so you can see it.
Can't see your screen.
Can you see it?
No,
I haven't shared it. Ah,
not yet.
get that arborist and beat him up, Peter.
My first attempt, I blocked out some of the identifying information, but I haven't this time.
Yeah, look, and I'm not going to discuss specifics. I just want to discuss generalized things. These little things here, contour lines, and they just link together bits that are the same. And this is a 1900 contour line, and these are spot levels, these things here. So 1922.
Still can't see your screen, Mark.
Yeah, we're still not sharing, Mark.
I did go to share all, but I probably didn't hit all the right buttons. And I know it gets really sensitive and moody about doing this entire screen. Share, now we're there. Okay. So you can see how well elevated weatherboard goes now.
Not yet, sorry.
I don't know why it's doing that then. Let me try again. Something went wrong, can't share screen. Okay, let me just try doing a tab. No, a window, yes. Okay, it'll take a window. Tell me it's sharing now.
Nope.
Okay, it's got me beat now. Can't share. Something went wrong with crashing. Try restarting your browser if problems continue. Okay, as much as that gives me a nightmare, I will restart the browser and join back in. Okay. I'm going to join up with you again in a second, Peter.
Yeah.
And also, do I want to join as a separate person? No. Join here too. Okay. Now, hopefully this will let me share. We'll try entire screen and see if it lets me do that. Yeah, we're getting an infinity. Okay, great. So now you can see a plan, yes?
Yes.
Ah, awesome. Okay, so we have some spot levels, and these are these little things here. This is our contour line, so this is our 1900 contour line. Not
And when you say spot levels in comparison to what? Like what's the
reference level, surveying reference level. But if you want to get some idea, this is the 1800 contour. So 1900 contour. Yep, 1900 contour here. There's the 1900 mark on the side. And so this spot here is 14 millimeters higher than this estimated line here. Now, these aren't exact. They go through, take a few measurements, and then just do a rough curve that comes in, although some of the new equipment, particularly the LiDAR equipment's amazing. It's precise as anything, plus or minus half a mil, which is incredible. And I suspect that for us, that'll be something that becomes a part of arboriculture. I dare say going around with a little backpack on your back with a LiDAR on top that's measuring the height, measuring the trunk diameter, taking a scan, a 3D scan of the tree. Nowadays, they can pick up dead branches, so you can ask the 3D scan to find all the dead branches of a particular diameter, and it'll put them in the 3D tree drawing. And I suspect that's where we'll go. Why? Because it's a great way to make extra money as an arborist, not necessarily because it's going to do anything more for the tree. And that's a big part of what drives a lot of what goes on. We've got a rock retaining wall here. We know there's a paling fence, and it's interesting, the paling fence and the property boundary aren't perfectly in line with each other, and that's not uncommon. Particularly in old areas, it's fairly common experience to have those things happen. Sometimes we'll have some details about the trees, and this one we don't. They've done a rough outline of the canopy, but it's hard to know whether that's what they're actually seeing or whether that's just something that they've decided to create. Now, this will be interesting. I should be able to open another one, but I may not get it to go. Yep, it's going to let me see it and let you see it as well. Okay, now we have a service plan. Oh my, it's nice and busy. I'm going to make it larger for you. We've got, first of all, overhead power lines. We've been taught that. We've got here a proposed route for services, and these are going to be a 750 millimeter diameter stormwater pipe to be installed under existing high voltage underground power cables. HV, high voltage here, so our power cables are running along here, and the high voltage doesn't tell us what they are, but I'm going to guess it's probably more than 11,000 volts or more. They may tell us elsewhere.
It is 11.
Yeah. Well, that was a good guess. Once they get up too high, they start to become really difficult to store. You've got to have them in oil cooled pipe work, and it's a pain. You've got an existing 350 millimeter stormwater here. So our pipe work in this diagram is all, oddly enough, nicely proportionate. And the black and white here shown as water, but it doesn't have to always be that way. So you get these inconsistencies between plans, and that becomes a bit of a frustration. W, we can guess, we know what that is. That's our water. And SW is our stormwater. But I'm not sure what black W is, and I'm going to guess that black W is our curb water or our wastewater that's coming along the curb. But let's see if we can find anything that gives us any hints on that. Nope. And it's a stormwater pipe, so it's interesting what W is. Do you know what W is, Peter, on this one?
No, I don't. It's not over in the key, is it?
No, I'm going to check. Existing. Oh, it's an abandoned water main.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got an abandoned water main that they picked up, and the water main's been upgraded, which is interesting because there's no crossover points of the abandoned main, which is, there's probably bits and pieces that are missing. And oftentimes you'll get a plan like this that shows what we call the hypothetical plan work, and then you get an as-built. And as-builts can vary from what has been. So you can end up with deviations to your plan set, which is really interesting.
They can choose what information to include on the report. So, for example, the trees that are of interest in this situation aren't actually shown on this plan. We had to get them to add them in. So
overlay them, that's right. But you can get some pretty good information already. This is a property boundary. This is really busy. Trying to find things to put under here is going to be difficult. I've got an NBN cable coming through, and it looks like this may be a footpath even here, but not a lot on the other side. So the other side, when we talk about trees, it's got a little bit more room to deal with things. And we do have a key, and we've got some things that are obvious. NBN, existing telecommunications pit. Let's see, there's one there, and T telephone, I'm going to guess. Isn't that fascinating? We have a telecommunications pit, no definition of what T is, but I think we can infer what T is. And T's a old telephone line, or I don't know, in my end of the world, somebody's been going around just interestingly cutting the old telephone line because it's got copper, and copper's of value. And so we have all these chunks of the old line, the old 100 pair and 200 pair bundles that are up in the air, all being cut off, and they're just hanging down the poles. So NBN, of course, is a lot more important. So we see a lot more of that now, and it's a lot less volume. Overhead power, E&O, existing overhead power, so that makes sense. So we've got a fair amount of information that's there. The key is your key component, and if it's not on the key, you just unfortunately are forced to guess, and that's not uncommon. Why do people do that, do you think?
Well, you have to decide just how much information you need to include, and so they may think, rightly or wrongly, that that bit of information is not going to be useful, so they'll leave it off.
Yeah, or they forget, they don't see it. It's just like arborists. We put a fence around a tree, but we might not mention that it's a fence. We just call it a tree protection zone, and because we said elsewhere that there's a fence there, we might forget in our key to indicate that that is the particular location of a fence. And so sometimes it's simply an inferred process. So I have to say service plans are probably the plans that I see the least. It's just one of those things that it's often not required in the development stage. And so you miss out on a whole pile of information, particularly when you're talking about subdivisions, because you've got to fit all this stuff along a street verge somewhere. And whilst a lot of this could be shared, like NBN and Telstra or telecommunications, they're not. So you would think that they would share, but they don't necessarily share. I think we can agree that if we had to plant, we'd want to plant on this side of the street.
Yeah, there's a drain on that side that's not shown.
A swale, a dish drain.
Yeah.
Okay. I would probably think about planting on that side, swale or not, trying to get it in here. I get asked this all the time. Oh, we just want to move a tree from one spot to another in the verge. And the first thing I hear is underground services. And I can tell you that it doesn't take a lot to end up with a big bill from underground services. Dial before you dig. And when the client says, oh, no, there's absolutely nothing there, know that may not be the case. Okay, now, this is going to take a little bit of time to load, as you saw. Now we're starting to get multiple layers, and every now and again, a builder or developer will send you through a set of plans that are just ridiculously large. They've got lots and lots of layers that take forever to download and to load. But we've got some information here. We've got a Southern Street and we've got a Hungerford Lane at the back. And somebody's wanting to put in a house. We've got some information. And there's lots of stuff we don't have. So let's zoom in. And every time we do any of this, it will be slow because we're doing this multiple layer process. And, I hate it when they send me through 50 gigabyte files and you just sit there and think, no. So things can become painstakingly slow. Okay, we do have some trees. We know where they are. They're in the verge. We do have a curb, so they're behind the curb. We've got some Telstra pits. I think we can infer somewhere there's a cable still, not shown. Said you don't tend to see service diagrams. A person has got a building. We know some distances. These are offsets. And it's not uncommon, because you're working with digital plans, for it to be difficult to measure things, because oftentimes the draftsperson or the designer won't give you a scale on your process. So if you're working with something like this, you want to work from a scale. So if this is 5.5 meters, we could measure that with a scale ruler, with a ruler. And let's just say, for the sake of it, on my screen at the moment, it's 110 millimeters. Well, then I would say, great. On that basis, then every 2 centimeters is a meter, and I'd be able to use that in making measurements. I've got one here, 1.50 meters. Again, that's close to a meter. Boy, that's useful again if I want to go do some measuring. So I can say, oh, look, here between the path and the tree, the back of curb, there's about a 1.8 meter wide opening. That's a nice wide. Come down to my end of the world, Ropes Crossing, and that's a huge space for tree planting. We've got a deep soil zone. Wow, unusual. Deep soil. A lot of times now, because we're developing so intensely, they want an area that's going to have deep soil. Now,
this LGA requires these deep soil zones in almost all their new developments.
Lots of councils do. Unfortunately, lots of councils don't define them very well. or haven't thought about them. So I won't mention, somewhere like Mosman, where deep soil includes 100 mils over bedrock. As long as that's the original soil level, that's deep soil.
This particular LGA will let you plant trees in that deep soil zone?
Yep. And so here, and they want deep soil for planting, but if you build the soil level up by 2 meters over a slab, that's not deep soil, but 100 mils over bedrock is deep soil, as long as that's the original soil level. So, as I said, they're often not very well thought through. And why is that? Because we're not perfect as people. So I don't take it as a criticism broadly, but just be aware that you need to know what the definitions of those sort of things are, particularly if you're looking at planting in that. How deep is that soil? And in most cases, it means original soil over original whatever's below, not a 3 meter deep planter on the third floor of the building. So it's sort of odd things. They're putting in a duplex here, 2 dwellings. We've got that information. We can see. We'll just zoom out a bit. I don't want to zoom out too much because I want to be able to read things still. And this becomes a dilemma. You always want to be reading. I'm running on a 32 inch screen in front of me. It's big. I can just see it on my laptop where it's really quite small. But if I could, I'd have a 120 inch screen with some of the plans. Once you get up above a residential lot, a 5-acre subdivision, just a nightmare going through in the old things. And I've gone so far as to think about going out and buying myself a continuous printer to do the printing of these things in A0 when they come in, because it's just so annoying having to plow backwards and forwards over sections of plans. You just don't get the same effect. I'll pull it out and show you. That's on my screen. Is it 100%? Probably not on your screen. Let me see if I can get it to 100% on your screen, just by looking at the comparison of the two. That is close to 100% on most of your screens. That's not a big image. I mean, I can see dwelling 1, dwelling 2, deep soil zone, and all of that. But if you want to have any extra detail, it's going to be hard to see. So, and then now we don't have a key that I've seen yet, but we're going to go, and keys are usually on the edges. Going to go right out and have a look and see if we can find a key. And you see how it's got to redraw it every time because of, okay, so now we've got a lot of information, no key. But it's going to give us some information about the building here, which is still important to us. I don't want to be a 1600 too much. Okay, I'll grab it from there. Okay, we've got some additional information here. I can probably go down just one little bit. And again, this delay because it's starting to get thing. Deep soil zones, 2.4 metres by 2.4 metres, front and rear achieved. Landscaping, 35% for lots that side required, 35% of, and then how many square meterage it is. So they said they've dealt with that. Their setbacks are how far they are from things. So a setback is how far, for example, from the west side, from the east, north, south, and there's some stepping in the buildings. I can tell that because this gives me sort of double and double. And then dwelling 2 the same. Percentage of the site that's covered. So dwelling 1 does 36.66 and dwelling 2, 33%. And wow, height is 9 metres and They've not got to the 9-meter height. They are 43 millimeters short of being at 9 meters high. No, they're 43 millimeters over. And 9 meters and 43. So they're going to say, look, 9 meters versus 9 meters and 43, not a huge difference. Some garaging stuff, some alfresco areas. We know now that there's a ground floor and a first floor. We don't know yet. I don't think they've given me any information that tells me whether there's basement parking. But I'm going to infer it by going back and having a look to see if there's a driveway. One thing that's going to give it away. Proposed driveway. Yes, I think we have basement parking.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why is I have a proposed driveway, but no garaging on that ground level. So I think we can infer that there's basement. No basement. Oh, yes, we do have a basement line. I'll find that now. This is why you want to, as I said, end up with a massive big screen. If anyone figures a better way of doing it, that would be great. I can tell you one company is doing it for householders, and they actually take all this information and project it onto the floor in a massive big warehouse so you can see what it looks like as you walk through your house. So this process of having to try and visualize what's there is not just a problem for arborists. So what was that?
Oh, sorry, that was my phone made of noise.
Oh, that's okay. I am guessing that this green dashed line is a basement line. Doesn't tell me. It's odd that it doubles up here.
There may be some other drawings that show those other details in this.
Yeah, that's right. And we're only looking at one set of the drawings at the moment. I think could be. Oh no, that's roof above, I think. Or yeah, well, and see, again, I don't know. And the plans may tell us or may not. I'm going to go right out and see if there's anywhere else where we've got information that is hidden.
I just
the entire thing. So my gut level feeling is that might be roof or structures over, although why you'd have a structure over the pool is not clear. And what they call landscaping, this wouldn't be sufficient enough for us to know whether that was landscaped appropriately. So let's ask what else we've got in the way of drawings.
All right, can I just ask, what's the idea behind the deep soil zone?
You could ask me that, and that would be a town planning question. And I have to now put myself in a situation where I'm going to get abusive emails because I think town planning is oxymoronical. I don't think there's much good town planning, and that's not meaning to be nasty, but I don't think that it's something that we do well. And a part of it is the way that our legislation is set up. We delegate local planning to councils. With the exception of Peter, I don't think anyone else here is old enough to remember, but in 1984, we had a referendum, and the referendum was, will we give local government constitutional power? And very prudently, in my view of things, we said drop dead. It was absolutely defeated. So what councils have instead is what's called delegated authority. So each council decides how it wants to manage things. And so you can get two neighbouring councils with two different sets of rules that can be almost diametrically opposed. And you shake your head and you say, why? A deep soil zone, in my mind, should be a space that allows for the growth of an adequate and suitable sized large tree. That's for me. But you'd have to ask a town planner. Maybe they just see that as a place where the dog can go and urinate.
Some
No
LGAs,
idea.
some LGAs have a private open space
Yep.
that they require for developments, and my understanding is that it's just so you don't get development that's boundary to boundary building.
What it strikes me as is you've got an area with, by the time you've done the landscaping hasn't been clear here, but looks at those lots of hard earth surfaces. We're going to have a crap load of runoff. Thank goodness this is in an area where there's good drainage. Otherwise, you'd end up in the western suburbs of Sydney blaming the next development for the fact that there's a lot more stormwater appearing to come down the drains. And you think about it, at one stage, the average house was about a quarter-acre block. Now we're down to 300 in these areas. And what do we say with these? Well, they did tell us they weren't too different from that, I don't think.
One was 36.6 and the other one was 33%.
Yeah, no, what was the total areas, though? 126. So we're 300 rather square meters of land for a house. That's a third of the size that we used to have. And the house used to have the roof, the driveway, usually 2 strips of concrete in the earlier days, then solid driveways. Then it became patios. Then it became al fresco areas. Then it became swimming pool. Then it became the hardscaping around the swimming pool. And more and more and more and more, we've been pushing water out into the stormwater system and out of the soil, which has some problems from a tree's perspective. So this deep soil zone is meant to provide connection back to the original soil, essentially. And if somebody said to me, look, this was once your view, but we're now going to give you this as a view, I'd be furious. So from my side, to call this the only area left that's deep soil, I'd be furious.
It looks tokenistic, doesn't it?
Oh, it looks vile. And, this is something that a town planner has figured out. I don't know why you don't have to have, a massive big strip somewhere. In my mind, it should have some connectivity. It's just this isolated hole. And theoretically, I'm not saying you could, but theoretically, you could just concrete all the way around that down to bedrock and have a tube that fills up with water and kills anything that grows in it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what the intent is. And so oftentimes when you're dealing with the development, you need to speak to the design team. You need to ask them questions. What are you wanting to do here? And I'm guessing that that'll become turf grass. It's Northern Rivers end of the world, Northern New South Wales. So I imagine that'll become Sir Walter. Lomo. Now, for that, someone's going to have a lawnmower, and you can start seeing why I get skeptical and cynical at this point in time. It'll be a battery-operated Ryobi lawnmower to mow 2.4 square meters, or a mowing contractor will come in and run down the side and down the 1 meter wide strip. So I have to walk sideways. And the Ryobi, thank goodness, is only 90 centimeters wide. So provided they don't put anything in the way, you can come down and mow this little strip of land and bill out it to the client. Lisa, what are we going to bill it out at? $100 a month, 2 mows a month on average throughout the year. It's just absurd. But it's what's built, and that's what we're seeing everywhere. Time to communicate with the team, but I can tell you that they've shown no trees on the plan being removed, but they have shown us street trees.
There were no trees on the lot.
But there are street trees, and street trees, according to the Australian standard, anything that can be affected by the proposed development needs to be considered. So what might be the consideration for the street trees?
They have to go, those two, because the driveway's right there.
Ah, so this is our driveway here.
Yep.
Yeah, looks like it probably is. So 2 trees have got to go. This tree looks like it could stay.
Hmm.
They can't
That looks
drive
like
in
it
between
might
the
have been a
trees.
driveway, but that driveway looks like it's being made redundant.
The driveway for that dwelling is in the lane.
Yeah, so we might be able to suggest planting in that location if that crossover is getting converted back to standard
We
curb
do
guttering.
need
And
to find somewhere to replace those trees in the street, and we looked up and down for a kilometre and can't find anywhere. I don't know what they've done actually.
and I think we all get the point. This is development. I have a rather blunt daughter who's Wiradjuri, and she says to me, Dad, the problems, the boat people started coming in 1770 and they haven't stopped. If you're going to have development, you're just going to have, it doesn't matter. We talk about sustainable development. That's like saying we have kind torture. Okay. The 2 words are completely at odds with each other. What we're saying is it's really more sustainable. And I don't know what this is. If we did this, we did this to animals. We put artificial lighting in. We'd have Peter out there demanding that the animals be released, and yet people pay money to buy this and live in it, and that's fine. I get it because I'd do the same. But it is sort of a contradiction in itself. And fortunately, as arborists, we don't have to deal with those issues. We only have to deal with what's happening with the trees. Okay, here's another set of survey plans, and this is done by a surveyor that hates arborists. I can tell that because the writing's in lime green, and anyone who tries to read lime green against white will know that's harder to do.
Yes, you are right. That surveyor does hate me.
Oh, and I'm here on a plan trying to find where I want to be, okay, and get it large enough so everyone can see it here. But if we blow it up, we do get enough. Now, the surveyor's got some great information here for you. And he does this again to torture you. He tells me it's a gum. So it means it's a tree. We've got that bit sorted out. We've got T, and that's for trunk in this case, I'm guessing. And it's 0.8 of a metre. Now, he could have measured that, estimated that. Okay, 2 possible ways of doing it. How likely do you think it was that he measured it?
Very, very unlikely.
Yeah. He's got a trunk spread of 10 metres and a height of 14 metres. Again, do you think he measured or?
No, this mob actually estimate.
Yeah, and look, estimation's great. I'll only ever estimate the spread and the height of a tree unless there's an issue that needs to be accurate. For example, they're planning to put a walkway over the top of the tree. Then we need to be precise. Apart from that, it doesn't matter if that tree is 10 metres or 12 metres high in real terms. The trunk diameter may matter. So we may need to be a little bit more accurate on the trunk, and we'll see where that might be the case. We're already familiar to it now. This is spot level. And in this case, our trees look like they might be on a neighbouring property, but we need to go out a little bit more. Yep, okay. We've got lots of spot levels. We've got a wall that's in here, garden bed. He's really good. He knows that this is a frangipani. And it's got a spread of 3 metres. It's 2 metres high. And it's got a 30-centimetre trunk. I am now getting less confident about their ability to estimate. That's a pretty unusual sounding frangipani, but it might be right. We've got some building structures, which is really great. We've got 2-story rendered and timber-clad residents. Just going to go out just one more if I can. And we've got some stuff on neighbouring building as well. So it's given us some bits. We've got a relative level of 9.89. That must drop down a heap. Oh, because this is a 2-story dwelling. It's okay.
It's
yeah. And it's on a slope block as well. And so let's go back out and look at our contours. Oh, yeah, it is. Here it is. 17 metres, 16 metres, 15 metres, 14 metres, 13, 12, 11, 10. And then it looks like they've put in half metres for us as well as these dashed lines. And that's pretty consistent as well. What else have we got on this plan? We've got a palm, so you can recognise a palm and a frangipani. We've got the existing crossover, and he's got a benchmark for the site. He's actually put in a reference point, so he doesn't have to keep on going back to the original point elsewhere. So his nail is at 6.37 metres above the standard reference point that he's using. We've got a SD, and that looks like a service of some description. Stormwater drain, maybe. Sewer drain, probably more likely. We've got a Telstra pit, and then again another service, a CD. So we now want to ask the question, do we have we've got a WD, water, I'm guessing. Don't know. And we've got A, B, C, D, E. Let's go have a look and see whether he tells us what he's given us, or she. Oh, yep, we have a nice big one here. It's going to be some fun, isn't it? North. And for those of you who don't know, magnetic north and true north are slightly different from each other, but for us it won't matter at all. Communications line, C. Oh, yes, we have subsurface utility, and we don't know what they are. We just know that he's picked up, or somebody's picked up, some form of subsurface utility. We know water line, we've got that, electrical line, sewer line, and I said that I thought the SD might have been sewer line, and D, drainage line. So we do have a reasonable key. Again, there's no uniformity to what a key is going to be, what colour gets done, how it's marked. There's no standard for that, but there is a standard for how a plan is folded. You'll be glad to know that. So it's one of those things. Of course, I got the orders, and just so you do know, it does go on. I got the orders just the other day from Jessica, who said, you're going to go out into the shed, you're going to take all the old files out of the compactors with plans in them, and you're going to shred the lot. She said, you're not teaching anymore. Nobody else needs to see a paper plan ever again, which, as I said, I think is sad, because they are nice, but
you should keep one or two for your museum collection, though, Mark.
Yeah.
In 100 years old, they may become really valuable as collector's items.
I don't think they'll ever become valuable as collector's items. I think what they'll become is interesting from a curiosity point of view, like the council permit from Parramatta Council that says prune tree by 1/3 and shows the top 1/3 of the tree cut off and the bottom 2/3 left. And that was in the 1990s, just to think of that in a lifetime. Well, we have made some changes, thank goodness for that, because there are days when I look at things and I think, I know I was going over this a decade or 2 decades ago, and I'm going over it again. And so I do look back occasionally at the really old stuff and think, yep, we have made some changes that are good. But you do get to the stage as an arborist that you'll get frustrated. And that's just a part of the entire process. So as far as a survey plan goes, it's pretty good. I mean, here he's got it right. He's just assumed that it's a native. He's got no idea. You know, gum, just he's got vague terms, but it's not a problem. In fact, I would rather him not have any of this on the plan. I would rather that trunk. Now, how did he figure out where he was going to plot that trunk? That's the next thing we need to consider. He probably shot it. So he shot it and he measured the trunk here and he said, look, or didn't measure it, but he might have done, he might have with a laser measure nice and quick across. And he said, look, this is 1 meter across, this gum tree, big tree. And so he's got a reference point that's here. When he plots it, he can plot it anywhere 360 degrees around that. And every now and again, you'll see a set of plans, and I think it's a real delight where you see the same tree plotted twice, mirrored on itself. Because he's picked it up from one spot, or she's picked it up from one spot and picked it up from another spot. And when you shoot it from there and you shoot it from there, you end up with a tree there and a tree there, depending on how you've plotted it. So be aware that all of these are somewhat of an approximation. The way to do it would be to triangulate it, measure 3 spots on the trunk at 120 degrees apart, and then put it exactly on. I cannot imagine a surveyor doing that in most circumstances. Occasionally in a court case, they need to, and they have to get it 100% or as close as they can to 100% accurate. And I can tell you that the Land Environment Court has had a number of those cases where 2 different surveyors still don't get the same end result. They get it to the stage that they're both within, maybe 5 or 10 centimeters of each other, or 2 or 3 centimeters of each other, but they're never identical. So it's just one of those wonderful things. So yeah, I think overall, if I was given a set of plans like that, I'd be pretty happy with it. Any questions on what we're saying?
Yeah, Dom has.
Yeah, go for it, Dom.
Just with your comment there, Mark, about how they say this point is where the tree is, and then on the map they have 360 degrees around that point to plot it. In your guys' experience, I mean, how often is that an issue that you need to know exactly where the tree is? Because in my short experience of doing consulting work, the difference that would make on some of the bigger trees is like not even 0.5% in terms of encroachment into a TPZ.
Absolutely. And go back the other side, and it's interesting. I was reading a forum the other day. I know I should never go onto forums, but I did. And somebody posted a picture of a transplant and said, wow, look how close they've cut to the tree. And somebody else said, yeah, it doesn't comply with the Australian standard. And I posted a sub-comment that said, so it tells you how valuable that information is from the standard. And it's not saying it's not of value, but it lets you know that it's not about a precision. So I think it would be a worry if I was looking at going 3 to 5 times trunk diameter away on one side, particularly 3 times, that's close. And I do developments where that's exactly what we do. We go 3 times trunk diameter away and do some horrible things to the tree, and the trees keep growing and keep surviving. In that situation, I'd want to know more accurately. I'd want to see some surveying points put down of the building. So they would then, I would say, look, let's just say this is our tree here. I would say, guys, we're going to go awfully close to that tree. Can you put me down some survey points for that wall so I can see how close it actually is to that tree?
Do you mean survey points on site so you can actually walk on the...
Yeah, go out with some pegs and peg it for me. Peg the northern wall of the proposed dwelling against that tree. It's damn close. Now, I'd be telling them, look at design alternatives, think about what you're going to do, look at putting in that you want to remove the tree, but, there's considerations there, and you may be better off just not removing the tree, retaining the tree, and pushing it, depending on what you're going to build. If you're putting a waffle pod slab, so waffle slab, concrete slab on ground, you might be digging in 100 or 200 mils, but digging in 100 or 200 mils, half a metre from a camphor laurel, is saying to it, happy birthday, it doesn't care. Same thing with Araucaria. It'll lose a couple of surface roots, but it's got enough sinkers that it's not going to be an issue. On the other hand, if you're on shallow sandstone soils, that would be problematic potentially. So
sometimes the accurate location of the tree is important to determine the ownership.
Yeah, that's I thought it would be most handy because there's 2 or 3 trees I've come across that are on boundary line, but fortunately not in a dispute matter.
So the Land Environment Court has dealt with that in New South Wales, and they make clear that you then need to have the geometric centre of the tree determined, and the geometric centre determines ownership. I don't know whether they've had a joint ownership. It's always been one side or the other, as far as I know. But many years ago, Alex Shigo told me about a wonderful story where the tree was pretty well split on the boundary line perfectly. One owner decided that he didn't want it, and he cut his half down, including ripping the trunk, and that ended up in a massive court case. So in New South Wales, Victoria, I'm pretty sure in every state, the legislation's not much to difference. That would be a criminal offence because it's property belonging to you and or another person, and you don't have the right to damage it. So that would put you in a difficult situation. Having said that, I've already made clear in these meetings that there's almost never been a criminal prosecution for damaging other people's trees, and it's just unfortunately how we still see lots of what we do. But yeah, look, there are times when I want to have a peg out done, and I would probably say once or twice a year I get a peg out done, just because we're pushing it, and I know we're pushing it.
Yeah.
And having said that, I am of the belief that if we're not pushing trees on development sites, then we're getting rid of far too many trees. I really think that we need to do our best to try and accommodate tree retention whilst allowing the desired yield, because if we don't, and we retain a tree, then the yield results in sprawl, and sprawl results in even more tree loss. And I made this point previously at a conference in a presentation I did on rutilometry, and that is, if you start having urban sprawl, then what happens is the wealthier people end up keeping trees and the poorer people end up without trees. And if you go to somewhere like North Melbourne, western suburbs of Sydney, I'm sure the equivalent would be south part of Brisbane, Peter, I'm not sure, and perhaps some of the north, it just becomes vile. You end up with these, roof after roof after roof and barely a tree around. So I think out of good design, we want to try and retain trees on development sites. And so if we're going to do that, we need to push limits. And if we push limits, occasionally we are going to have a failure. But I would say if you push the limits 100 times and you had, 1 or 2 sites fail, that's probably a fair compromise. There'll be others who disagree with that, and that's their perspective, and I respect that. And I'm not going to say they aren't entitled to it. I just don't agree with it.
It's interesting when you said that. My first thought was, I wonder what the insurance company's perspective would be.
In most cases, failure is not about trees falling over. In most cases, failure is about trees dying. But if you're worried about tree stability, you can put a tree motion sensor on a tree. They now have them with eSIMs in them. Our first 2 eSIMs under order. And you can sit there and watch it on your phone. You can have it send you an alert saying the tree's just moved half a degree at ground level. time to send in a response. And what we know is if you get failure in those conditions, in almost all cases, failure is slow. Ken James picked up his first failure with a tree motion sensor, and I think he said it was about 6 hours between the initial first fracture that was picked up and the final failure of the tree. That's a fair time. Most people can respond in that time.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
So I think, and as I can't think of a tree that I've had that I've pushed the limits on that has fallen over. I've had a few die.
Well, that's what the structural root zone is for, to make sure that we don't. What are your thoughts on structural root zone?
Structural root zone is not accurate either. It's just an indicative area where we need to think about. And so if you start looking at, and I'm happy to cover this in more detail at the next ArborMentor if you want, look at how close you can get. But Lisa, you've been with me down to Grafton where they ground into the trunk of a camphor laurel right up on the street. I'm pretty sure you recall the tree, do you?
I certainly do.
And yeah, the tree did sit back a bit, but that's it, 600 mils below ground, grind into it, right up to the trunk, right, take that whole flare out. And there's other camphors in Grafton where they've done multiple sides. So I'm not saying it's what we want to do. I'm saying what we know is that structural root zone is about when we need to start thinking about the stability of the tree. It's not the point which we can't go past. Then there's really clear evidence of that. And Maddock, let's go back to Maddock's discussion on TR. Maddock said when TR is less than 0.3 or arguably 0.35, and then we got the tree should be removed was commonplace in arboriculture, still is taught in various places.
So you'd have to remind me what TR is.
The thickness of the wall over the ratio, over the radius is a ratio. So as the wall gets thinner, the cavity is bigger, obviously. So we've got a metre diameter tree. So 2 metre diameter tree, nice and easy, 2 metre diameter tree. And it had a 30 centimetre wall thickness from a cavity. So, the middle part was missing. It'd be missing 70 centimetres to the centre of the radius, centre of the trunk, and 30 centimetres of solid wood. Then we'd say that tree had a TR ratio of 0.3.
Yeah.
And that's hitting a threshold where we want to start thinking about stability. But tree biomechanics and tree anatomy tell us that that doesn't necessarily need to be a point of concern. That is a point at which we start thinking differently. And there's a gentleman called Vesely. Vesely had done some great work on statics around the same time as Klaus Maddox was doing his stuff. And I remember finding this contradiction between what Vesely was saying and what Maddox was saying. And so I hopped on a plane, went over to Santa Monica where Maddox was doing some lectures, and I sat down with him and said, Klaus, how do you reconcile what you're saying and then what Vesely's work does? And he said, Mark, I never said remove the tree. He said, I said, this is the time you need to think. And so the structural root zone is an indication of when you need to think. The 12 times trunk diameter is the time when you need to think. It's not that you can't get closer. Clearly we do, because we transplant trees. And they're typically a radius somewhere between 5 and 6 times. If I do 6 times, that's nice and easy. That's 25% of the area required to protect the tree if we go to 12 times. Any equation that has an error of 75% would be laughable. No one's saying you can't get down to 6 times. What we're saying is you need to use your brains to go past 12.
That's the issue with the standard. That the standard's not prescriptive, but it is interpreted as prescriptive by people.
Yeah, and certainly the new standard is going to be out hopefully before the end of the financial year. There's just about 3 or 4 tiny little things that need to be finished off and sorted out, and it's right to go. it tries to make that clearer, that this is not a you must do this. You can do all sorts of things, including, putting massive big piers in, right up to the trunk of a tree. And I know that because I've done it, and I've still got those trees hanging around 20 and 30 years later. In fact, I'm doing a presentation for ArborMentor in Canberra next week, and I was just working on the final images, going through all the old archives, and we're not perfectly digitized, but some of them have been, and looking at sheep piling. And Peter, you'll enjoy this. Sheep piling 1 times trunk diameter from half the radius of half the circumference of an araucaria. And the guy that I was with saying this tree is going to die. And I can still go back and look at this tree today, 30-something, 40-something rather years later. And the tree says, yeah, well, you didn't understand me. He
is right, though. It is going to die, but maybe not for another couple of 100 years. That's all.
Yeah, and so we've got to be careful not to see the word can't. And I know I've showed it before, but I just have to pull it up because I think it just says it so well.
Yeah, I'll probably have to head off after this as well.
I'll just show you this picture and then you can go, Dom.
Yeah, that's all right. Just on that with the tree, with the SRZ not being a hard rule, for someone like myself who just doesn't have the knowledge that comes with experience, should I, for the time being, treat the SRZ as a bit of a hard no, or try to play around with it?
Get yourself educated. And I don't mean that negatively.
No,
sure. With other people. Go have a look at what people have done. I'm forever amazed. I can still go past places to this day where somebody is digging 2 times, 3 times, 1 times trunk diameter away from a tree, and look at it where the excavation's been left open, and you sit there and think, and I can think of one that really is clear in my mind at Windsor Road at Balcombe Hills, and it's now 5 or 6 years down the line at 1 and 2 times trunk diameter from 3 trees. 1 died, 2 are okay. That's not what I expected. The excavation's open. They haven't done a damn thing. And 2 of the 3 trees are still alive 7 or 8 years later. That's pretty good.
I'd encourage you to reach out, Don. We're always happy to help where we can.
And this is one of those situations where we're happy to answer and look at questions like that here on the forum for that reason.
For sure.
To give you different opinions.
I haven't come across anything where I'm erring the line yet. I don't get involved in the design stage. Most of the time, I get called as the last report they need for DA. So I can't really go in and say, "Can we change this?"
And look, you're in Victoria, are you?
Canberra.
Canberra, okay. You've got some different legislation in Canberra.
We do.
Which is unusual, and it's not all smooth sailing, but it is great in other areas. So I'm pleased to see what Samantha Ning has done down there. It is difficult, but again, Queanbeyan and the horrible end of the New South Wales is just across the border. So you will find yourself seeing more over time. This here is a shot from Georgia, Europe.
Are these the eucalypts that have been transplanted?
Yeah, there's a man. Okay.
Yeah, right. The big trees.
There's a cable. That's only 3 or 4 times trunk diameter. Damn it. It's not what I expect at all. And it just lets you know that we still don't know. What really humiliates me about this is this has been done by a builder. And I find it fascinating that a builder can do this and arborists struggle to do this.
Well, nobody told the builder that he couldn't, probably.
And he is a billionaire, so, he can do whatever the hell he likes. But this is a great one. This is a eucalypt with a hollow and a cavity. And here, I know for me, 3 out of 4 arborists would say cut it down.
So
And I,
those cables everywhere, those guy ropes supporting the trees.
yeah, they've been, because they've been transplanted, they've been braced, and
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's necessary or not. By the way, this is his shack.
Yeah, I remember
there's-
seeing this photo.
Yeah,
before.
yeah. So I think if you keep in mind that it's okay to fail. I don't know where we got to it as arborists, but at some stage as arborists, we said, look, it's really wrong to make a mistake. It's really wrong to learn. I'll say to you, it's perfectly good. I'm still learning. I'm still making mistakes. Um, you know, otherwise, what we end up doing is we end up walking so far away from the edge of the cliff face, we don't ever get to see the view. You know, we miss out on so much of what we should see by not pushing the limit. Now, I'm not saying push the limit for the sake of it. I'm saying you've got to make a balanced decision. And I can tell you, someone just asked me just the other day, they said, look, we want to do this building, 2 more towers in around this tree. We're concerned about the shading. And so he reached out and said, Mark, can you give me a supporting expert's report just to discuss one issue on this development? And I said, sure. That sort of stuff is there. People don't want to keep this bottled up. They're happy to share the information. That's generally been my experience. Peter, yours?
Yep.
Yeah. So just if you're feeling like, can this be done? Ask around, reach around. I'm amazed at how
Well, I'm actually doing a bit of work with a friend of yours, Bruno Wright from Canopy.
yeah, I know,
So
Bruno.
I'm the other half of his consulting department at the
Oh,
moment.
yeah, okay. Hi, Dom. So yes, if you're not, as a consultant, getting to a stage on a fairly regular basis that you're saying, what the F? I've got no idea. I'm out of my depth. I'm confused. I'm not sure. Something's wrong, because it's still happening to me. And I got a few more years on you.
Yeah.
So you should be getting that feeling. And I've got a whole pile of phone of friends about all different sorts of issues. I can tell you, if I needed to play something with PDF in terms of a plan, I'd talk to Peter, because I still have troubles opening PDF files. I regularly have to go out and say, hey, or I have to go back to other researchers and look at the information and say, well, what about this and what about that? There is a huge amount of information. When you did your diploma, you probably got, if you're lucky, 300 or so hours of class time. Lisa got 450. Peter got about 450. My early students got 600. And the students that did the 600 hours all said to me, oh, it could have been longer. There's still so much I don't know. And my experience is, the further down the line you go, the more that feeling sets in. That is, I'm probably at the thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of hours in lectures, in courses, and I still get to the case, I think, oh, I'm not sure, I don't know, and I have to go find a textbook, a research paper or something that gives me some answers, or my phone of friends. And, I've got some really wonderful phone of friends. Over the years, I've certainly pulled on a lot of those for information. So don't hold back. Some people will say no. Some people will say yes. Those that say no, that's great. Go on to the next one. The more you ask, the more you get. Okay?
Yes, no, I do like asking questions for sure.
And ask, if Bruno says no, then go find somebody else and ask them, and somebody else and somebody else, and eventually someone will say, yeah, I'll spend a few minutes and answer that.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah, no, I do appreciate it. Thank you. And look, if I come across anything interesting, I'll put it to this group. I just haven't yet.
Well, as I said, you're in an unusual area where your regulations are very prescriptive, and that takes away a lot of the uncertainty. And I don't think that that's all bad, but it does come at a price. But
Yeah.
having said that, you also live in an incredibly opulent area. So Canberra is full of bureaucrats with lots of income, and your standard of living is slightly better to a lot better than most of us.
Just on your comment of the legislation, some days I do feel like my job is just reading the legislation for another person. Yeah, so it does have those days.
I think that is an important part of our role, is knowing where the legislation is or what the legislation might be, how to find it. Today I had to deal with the trees disputes between Neighbours Act, the issue of nuisance, Young v Wheeler. I had to find the Young v Wheeler judgment, which I have in old print because that's how it was done back in those days. Yesterday it was a council's tree preservation order and its restrictions, and whether pruning to clear the eaves could be done, and what were the restrictions on that, and what were the penalties if they didn't follow that. That's this week at least. In terms of dealing with things. So you are going to, again, have to do that for the rest of your life. And that's the role that we fill, is we help make sure that people don't do the wrong thing.
Yes. Yeah, we do. Look, I better get moving, but thank you all for tonight, and I will see you all again in a fortnight.
You've got it.